Hello, my name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant. Today, I'm going to be covering this book, The Ancient. This is the second book in the saga of the First King, one of R.A. Salvatore's books. He is more well known for the Dritz Do'Urden Dark Elf series. This one is in his personal setting that he's written some books for. I purchased this book from McKay Books in Manassas, Virginia. I bought it back in 2018 or 2019 before coming out to New Mexico for work in 2020. I bought it for $2.40. I still have the sticker. I don't keep it on the book. I keep it in the front cover of this book just so I can hold on to it. This book cost $5.99 when it was first purchased, so I bought it for somewhat less than half price. This book was different in a good way from The Highwayman, which opened up this saga. In The Highwayman, Bransen is, for the most part, coming into his powers, but in a really awkward way of being almost too perfect all the time. In this book, he's kind of overcorrecting. So this book changes perspective constantly, but continues some of the issues from the first book, which is Bransen is the product of a monk of the main religion in their region and a woman from another religion in the region to the south. And through her spiritualism, she is able to manifest a lot of the same abilities as the monks are through a conduit of specific stones for different effects. So Bransen is crippled, but he is able to use his mother's teachings to stabilize himself and to function as a normal, average human being. But when in contact with these stones from his father's religion, he is able to perform feats of greater acrobatics. He is able to use the spiritual training from his mother's religion effortlessly, and he can then focus on doing everything else, such as daring acts of swashbuckling. But in the start of this book, he is traveling with his wife and his mother-in-law. But he's overcorrecting. He keeps on doubting whether or not he can be a good lover, and clearly his wife doesn't care. She loves him regardless of whether he is able to be openly himself or whether he has to take off the stone from his forehead and then become crippled. He hates having to do that because he has tasted the freedom of a more normal life, but his wife still loves him regardless. And so it's a lot of overcorrection, that wangsty that you get a lot of in the Dritz Do'Urden series. It's kind of R.A. Salvatore's bread and butter, and it seems to be what he falls back on when he has nothing else. Which is a bummer because the rest of this book is really fascinating. The book changes perspective regularly. And though none of the characters are of the same religion as the antagonist of the first book or this book, the Samhaist, Samhaist, it's a druidic kind of practice focused heavily on sacrifice to appease the world. The other characters are really fascinating. So there's Michaela, who is a shaman of Yan Osum, who is she's akin to the Druidic Samhaists, but in a more archaic way. Hers is a more primitive culture and a more primitive religion. So she has her faith and is able to draw power through it. And then there is Cormac, who is also a monk of the Abelican faith, like Bransen's father. But, just like Bransen's father, is open-minded enough to acknowledge that other religions and other traditions have found strength in different magical effects, and supposes that we need to treat people with more compassion and mercy, and through such treatment they can learn from each other. That's proven to be heretical thinking in the first book, and so Cormac is cast out for that and another reason, which is very important to the plot. But he's also kind of just a big, strong young monk. He's kind of a boxer or a brawler, which is important because his monastery is setting up far to the north of where the Abelican faith usually is, and they're constantly defending themselves from the Powery dwarves, which I mentioned in the first as kind of being like red caps. They're defending themselves from the people of Michaela. Her people are attacking them. Trolls, which are like watery beasts that attack people. In one attack, the Powery dwarves attack Cormac's monastery, and then while that battle is going on, some trolls show up. And the Powery dwarves start retreating, but one of them gets caught by a troll, and Cormac goes to help him and then tries to get away and is knocked out. But that kind of gives the Powery dwarves a second wind. So between the Abelicans and the Powery dwarves, the trolls are beaten back, and Cormac is taken prisoner, but he's not killed for a couple reasons, and mostly because the dwarf he saves now considers himself to have a debt to Cormac, and through a debt he's not going to be allowed to return to his people, but he can also duel to fight for his life. If he's going to return to his people, he needs to win his freedom. And so one of the Powery dwarves fights Cormac, and Cormac somehow wins and kills the dwarf. But according to the dwarves, Cormac now has to dip that dwarf's cap into that dwarf's lifeblood. And when Cormac does so, he finds that some of the strength of that dwarf comes into him through that cap. And he questions it because the dwarves do that constantly. They're really powerful for their size. They do so when they dip their hats into the blood of someone they kill, they gain strength. And this is the same for Cormac. And then Mickwick is one of those Powery dwarves that comes along and helps them, and there's like 4 or 5 different people that their paths are converging because the Samhaists and their leader are trying to push forward very aggressively, controlling any monster they can, trying to control this giant ice worm. Think the sandworms of Dune, but something in ice. And so he's got a plan to, one, flood the entire lake and thus kill all the barbarians, the Michaela's people, kill the monastery, the Abelican monks, kill the Powery dwarves, kill the trolls, kill everything downstream, flood the area, kill everyone, push down south with giants, with any horde of monsters they can, with this giant worm. And Bransen is sent on effectively a Suicide Squad mission by the lady that rules the northernmost region, she says, look, if you can help defeat this ancient Badin, then, which is the leader of the druidic Samhaists, if you can defeat him, then I'll let you go and I'll provide you with resources so you can go south like you want to go. Bransen is daring and bold, but he ends up causing the loss of his squad. And the only person that survives is an Abelican monk who is able to help out despite being imprisoned. There's like a bounty hunter that's helping them out, who is the only one who has seen ancient Badin in the past. And Bransen, when he's knocked out, his stone falls off and he's a cripple again, and he can barely even move to get to in the lines, the lines of slaves being delivered to ancient Badin by these giants. And so it's a really interesting story. Bransen's Suicide Squad-esque group ends up meeting with Michaela, with Cormac, with Mickwick, and they unite to fight ancient Badin, and that's the main plot of the book. And I honestly felt like Bransen's story, despite it pushing the plot along the most, was the least interesting part. What I found interesting was Michaela's storyline, Cormac's storyline, the open-mindedness that they grow into, but also that they lead their people in their strength. It's a really fascinating book, except when reading Bransen's sections. And so I liked it. I paid $2 and it says 40 cents. So yeah, I paid $2.40 for this, and it was worth $2.40. I don't think I would have paid full price, if only because I didn't like the first book, and if I knew it was going to have so much Highwayman, Bransen sections, I wouldn't want to read it. I bought this not knowing the story or the character, and now that I know the character, I would probably pass or try to find it at a library. That way I don't have to pay for the book itself. So the Abelican monk with Bransen ends up surviving, and that monk has a interesting discussion with Cormac. In the epilogue, it's, what are you going to do now? Or that kind of epilogue. And he says, I had thought the feel of your clothing to be that of an Abelican robe. I am not Abelican anymore, brother. John stopped and faced Cormac, though of course he couldn't actually see the man. John is blind. John is a blind monk. I was cast out, Cormac admitted. I questioned the limitations. Limitations? The Abelican Church's refusal to explore those traditions and magic outside the domain of the Church and the gemstones, Cormac honestly offered. There is more beauty to be found in this world, a wider truth than that which we have come to represent. Brother John gave a curious and Cormac had no idea if he was offending or intriguing the man. The woman who accompanied us into the castle is a shaman of an Alpinadoran tribe, Cormac explained. I gathered as much. I love her. And I see in her true and divine beauty. I see it in our other friend as well, this man named Bransen. Ah, the Highwayman. Yes, said John. He is a unique one, and possessed of godly powers. Brother John shook his head, unwilling to make that jump. Powers akin to those of our gemstones, Cormac clarified, and John now nodded. The ending really emphasizes in that epilogue the Abelicans are closed-minded. Maybe a few individuals are open-minded, but they kind of have to be closed-minded to remain with their faith. So, an interesting story, except in regards to Bransen, which honestly was my chief complaint with the first book, The Highwayman. So, yeah, I wouldn't knowingly buy it again, but it was a good enough book for one read. So, yeah. My name is Wildstag, and thank you for tuning in to another used book rant.